Now, what actually are the consequences of a currency that's being managed? My name is Emmanuel Wa-Kyendo. We are going over economics. The topic is why currency politics should matter to Kenyans, right? The first main point is this: when currencies are being managed, the government is picking winners or losers. When currencies are strong, those who export are in a disadvantage, and those who import are in a relative advantage, right, compared to the other guys. So if a government is making a currency, keeping a currency artificially strong, then it's picking the importers over the exporters. If it's keeping a currency artificially weak, then it's picking exporters at the expense of importers. But if it's moving naturally, then it is the market that is picked who should win and who should lose, and market fundamentals, so to speak. So here is an example of a disadvantage. If the Kenyan currency is artificially strong, then if you are also receiving remittances from abroad, then you are basically, maybe the individual sending you remittances have to buy more shillings than they used to, or so they incur a higher cost, or you incur a higher cost because you lose some of the shillings that you could have received from abroad, right? That was coming in the form of remittances. Also, capital flows can be affected by currency, and when the currency is managed, if it's too weak, perhaps capital could flow away. If it's very strong, capital could flow inwards. But let's have a look at this data here. Now, this chart is called personal remittances received as a share of GDP. And what is it demonstrating? This chart is showing us that the evolution of personal remittances received as a share of the GDP between the years 2005 and 2023. What is this chart saying? You have a blue line that is Kenya, an orange line that is Tanzania, Uganda, Burundi, and a red line for GDP per capita neighborhood, 7 countries. Now, first I explained the red line. What countries are represented here? These are the countries what were in Kenya's GDP per capita neighborhood in the early 90s. They include Vietnam and Thailand and Cambodia, just to name but 3. So these countries had their average income in these countries was the same as Kenya's was in that year, not in the early 90s, right? So they're a useful comparison because if we want to understand where we could have gone wrong in the last 30 years, we could make all kinds of comparisons. But how about comparing ourselves to those to whom we stood shoulder to shoulder in per capita terms? And then say, okay, if they got wealthier after that, what did they do that we didn't do? And they did get wealthier. Now you can read about this in the paper And Then the Floods, that explains, among many things, that Kenyans only between the years 1990 and 2024, Kenyans only got 25% wealthier. So one way to think about that is, some of us, our parents started working in the early 90s. Someone who started working in the early 90s, on average, they only got 25% wealthier since the year the early 90s. Now, this number tells us a lot of things, including many people have sometimes shared memes that ask what their parents were doing in the early 90s, or when they were, because they found themselves, they wished that their parents were wealthier than they found themselves. And it's a joke, but let's think about this. If on average Kenyans only got 25% wealthier since 1990, and that's the average experience, then the question might be, maybe it's not their fault. Maybe there's something to do with policy that kept them there. how did our GDP per capita neighborhood themselves perform? That is, how did Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, what was their experience in that period? These countries, the average person got 4 times wealthier than they were in the early 90s. So golly, there is something that they did that Kenya did not do. Because they got 4 times wealthier, while Kenya only got 25%. Now, to this chart before us, these countries not only got wealthier, but they are actually They were the citizens were receiving, like, you take all the remittances received as a share of GDP, they were pretty stable and just about 0.05% of GDP. Kenyans on average were more dependent on remittances, or remittances were a greater feature of Kenyan income, of the experience of Kenyans, their income, right, than Tanzania, Uganda, Burundi, and these countries in the GDP per capita neighborhood, right? That's the year 2023. And that during that period since 2005, the personal remittances have been increasing. So, what do remittances actually mean? They could indicate all kinds of things. We could boil it down maybe to 2. Kenyans abroad are sending more money to their fellow Kenyans, but more Kenyans might also be emigrating. So, if more Kenyans are emigrating, that means there's fewer opportunities in Kenya. And that, you see, the countries that were in Kenya's GDP per capita neighborhood, they were performing, they seem to be, you could interpret this as saying, either they sent fewer people abroad than Kenya did as a share of their GDP, or their foreigners were sending less money home. Whatever the case, they could be experiencing less stress that's requiring more money from abroad to become a feature of their remittances. Or you could think about it another way and say, but like in whatever way, if remittances are becoming a growing share of GDP, that's not a healthy sign in terms of Kenya's productivity. It is unhealthy. It says something that remittances, so foreign productivity is more healthy and growing healthier over time than Kenya's productivity. Negative sign. Let's see if we got time for one more chart. Now, personal remittances received as a share of total investments. So if we look at investments, Kenyans received much more remittances when you compare to total investments, right? Total Kenya investments than the per capita neighborhood or Tanzania, Uganda, and Burundi. Not only that, but it's been accelerating for Kenyans. This investments are not growing. Remittances are growing faster than it, or rather, remittances are growing faster than investments. This also bodes ill for Kenyan productivity. We will end the chapter there. Thank you so much. I've been Emmanuel, exploring this topic, trying to understand why currency politics matters. Now, the conclusion here is this. If a Kenyan currency is being managed and being kept artificially strong, then Kenyans are actually losing on the remittances front. Cheers. And that's why currency politics matters.